Have you ever felt like you don't belong in the surface world? Like you sense things others can't, but have no words to explain them? Maybe you walk through life quietly carrying visions no one sees. You're not broken. You're not strange. You might be what Carl Jung called an introverted intuitive, one of the rarest psychological types in Jungian psychology. Misunderstood, often isolated, but profoundly gifted. In this video, we'll enter that inner realm where symbols speak louder than words, and the unconscious whispers truth to those who are willing to listen. This perfectly captures the challenge faced by those with introverted intuition. In Jungian psychology, this function connects the individual to the symbolic life of the unconscious. And he's right. These individuals often learn to guard their visions, to protect the delicate insights that rise from the unconscious like mist off a still lake. Yet this inner silence is not a weakness, it is a sacred strength. When such a person enters a room, they may receive vivid inner images, glimpses of the soul of a stranger they've never met. They may intuitively grasp profound truths about someone's psychology, or even glimpse hidden stories from that person's past, sometimes without realizing it. And when they speak of it innocently, they may find themselves caught in strange reactions as if they had said too much. This makes their journey both lonely and luminous. The inner world of the introverted intuitive is rich but often isolating. The very things that fascinate them, the symbols, the archetypes, the layers of meaning in dreams, are foreign to most. This is the mark of a true introverted intuitive, one of the rare psychological types described by Carl Jung, whose inner world is often deeper than words can express. And yet, as Jung emphasized, any psychologist or seeker of truth must learn to recognize these patterns. The first question is not, "What do you think?" but rather, "Are you introverted or extroverted?" Then comes the deeper work. Are you driven by sensation or intuition, thinking or feeling? Things become even more complex when we realize that our dominant tendencies are always compensated by their opposites. For example, the introverted thinker often has a crude, underdeveloped feeling function, what Jung called an archaic extroverted feeling. And so you might meet an introverted philosopher who can analyze the cosmos but struggles to express affection or read emotional cues. Welcome, dear lover of wisdom, to another journey with Irrevelato, where we explore the ideas of humanity's most brilliant minds. If you've ever felt different, if your inner world is vivid and symbolic, yet difficult to share with others, then this exploration of Carl Jung's insights into the introverted intuitive type may speak directly to your soul. Jung's work doesn't just analyze the mind, it unveils it. He helps us see how the unconscious speaks not in words but in symbols, just as clearly and truthfully as the visible world speaks in form. Whether you see yourself in Jung's description or simply want to better understand someone close to you who lives in this way, I invite you to watch with an open and curious mind. As Jung beautifully wrote, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." Before we begin, I want to thank you for your presence, for your curiosity, and for valuing deep, meaningful content in a world often obsessed with noise. Irrevelato exists to nourish minds like yours. If our content resonates with you, please consider liking this video, sharing it, and subscribing to the channel. Your comments help us grow, and your support makes this mission possible. For those seeking an even deeper experience, consider joining us on Patreon. Our patrons enjoy ad-free videos, exclusive live Q&A sessions, and the opportunity to vote on future topics, all while supporting the continued creation of soul-stirring content. You'll find the link in the description below. Thank you for allowing me to do what I love, exploring timeless ideas and sharing them with kindred spirits around the world. Now, let's step into the unseen and uncover the quiet power of the introverted intuitive. Remember, you are always welcome here. The Irrevelato community is a space for seekers, those who value truth, meaning, and the invisible threads that connect the soul to the cosmos. So now, without further delay, let us step into the mind of Carl Jung as he guides us into the depths of one of the most mysterious psychological functions, introverted intuition. Make yourself comfortable. Quiet your outer world, and allow this visionary thinker to light a lamp in the inner corridors of your mind. Introverted intuition is a doorway to the unseen. Unlike extroverted intuition, which chases outer possibilities and future events, the introverted form turns inward toward what Jung called the inner object. This object isn't something you can touch or measure. It lives not in the physical world, but in the psychic realm, in the unconscious, and more specifically, in the collective unconscious, that deep, timeless reservoir where symbols, archetypes, and primal truths dwell. These inner images function much like external objects do for our senses. They appear, they impress, they shape perception. But they do not exist in the outside world. Their reality is not physical, it is psychic. They are autonomous, alive in their own dimension, and introverted intuition has the uncanny ability to perceive them clearly, almost as if they were tangible. To the introverted intuitive, these images often come uninvited, triggered not by logic, but by subtle shifts in the inner atmosphere. A smell, a phrase, a fleeting sensation might set off an entire chain of visions, and while others may simply notice the sensation, a wave of nausea, dizziness, or unease, the intuitive dives straight to the source behind the symptom. Let's take an example. Imagine someone is suddenly struck by a spell of vertigo, no clear cause, no warning. A person with introverted sensation might analyze the experience in detail: how strong the dizziness was, how long it lasted, where it started. But the introverted intuitive, they don't linger there. That sensation becomes a launching pad for something deeper. In an instant, their consciousness may be filled with a symbolic image, a man tottering, pierced through the heart by an arrow. The sensation was only the match. The vision is the fire, and that image, haunting and poetic, becomes the intuitive's obsession. They follow it, watch it unfold, observe its evolution. The picture may twist, shift, fade, return. To most, it's just a strange daydream. But to the intuitive, it's a revelation, a message from the unseen depths of the psyche. This is the strange gift of the introverted intuitive. They perceive the background processes of consciousness, the mythic forces that swirl behind our thoughts and feelings with almost the same clarity that the rest of us see the outside world. For them, inner images are not abstract. They are real. Not metaphorically real, psychically real, carrying a weight, a presence, a truth. But here lies the paradox. Because their function bypasses the sensory and physical, they often fail to notice the connection between these images and themselves. They may witness a vision of despair or transformation, and never realize it mirrors their own soul's journey. To the judging types, the thinkers and feelers, this detachment may seem baffling, even irresponsible. But Jung observed it time and again in his work with intuitives. Just as the extroverted intuitive leaps from trend to trend, forever chasing what's next, without anchoring in the present, the introverted intuitive glides from one inner vision to another, untethered to self-reflection or moral grounding. And so, what is revelation to one person may be madness to another. Yet Jung never judged this gift. He simply illuminated it. Because, in the end, the inner world, the world of symbols, visions, dreams, and archetypes, is not a lesser reality. It is the soul's language, spoken not in sentences, but in images. And for those rare souls called to walk this path of introverted intuition, their burden is heavy, but their insight is divine. To both the introverted and the extroverted intuitive life presents itself as a problem of perception, an aesthetic experience. But for the introverted intuitive, this inward gaze often comes at a cost, a loss of connection to their own body, and a dim awareness of how their presence affects others. They dwell more in visions than in flesh. To the extrovert looking in, it may seem like they're lost in a world of useless fantasies cut off from reality. But this couldn't be further from the truth. Jung reminds us, while the visions of the unconscious may seem fruitless in terms of immediate utility, they are far from meaningless. These images, born from the creative life force that pulses beneath the surface of ordinary awareness, represent alternate ways of seeing the world. They hold the seed of future realities. Without these visions, there would be no innovation, no myth, no prophecy. There would have been no prophets in Israel. Introverted intuition doesn't just perceive symbols, it communes with the archetypes. These are not just psychological patterns. They are the ancient inherited forms that have taken shape over millennia. They are the distilled essence of everything humanity has experienced. Joy and trauma, birth and death, love and exile boiled down into primordial templates. These archetypes are like cosmic fingerprints pressed into the unconscious. They are what Jung called the a priori foundations of the psyche. Timeless blueprints formed from the psychic echoes of all who came before us. The more a human experience repeats itself through generations, through intensity, the more deeply it etches itself into these archetypes. So, when the introverted intuitive has a vision, it is not a fantasy. It is a reverberation of history, a glimpse into something older than time yet still alive in the human soul. And these visions are not static. They evolve with the world. The unconscious is not a dead thing, some fossilized psychic remnant. It lives and moves within us, transforming constantly in sync with global tides and personal events. That is why introverted intuition can sometimes foresee future possibilities not through logic, but through a kind of symbolic foresight. Their visions often carry the energy of things that have not yet arrived, but are already taking shape in the collective unconscious. This is how some intuitives are able to sense what is coming long before it arrives. Their connection to the archetypes gives them access to the laws that govern all experience, whether personal or cultural. It's not fortune-telling, it's pattern recognition at the soul level. But such a gift, if not grounded, can become a burden. When introverted intuition becomes too dominant, it can shape a very peculiar kind of person: the mystic, the dreamer, the visionary artist, or the misunderstood eccentric. At its highest, it births the poet who speaks in riddles, the painter who unveils otherworldly scenes shimmering in color, or the prophet who points to truths no one else sees. These individuals do not merely imagine, they perceive the invisible. But not every intuitive becomes an artist. Those who do not create may still carry visions so strong they are shaped by them, even possessed by them. And when their intuitive gift isn't balanced by judgment or connection to outer life, they risk drifting into isolation, brilliant but unreachable. To their families or peers, they may seem like a puzzle, a paradox, wise and naive at once, a soul from another world trapped in this one. Yet there is a turning point, a moral awakening. Some introverted intuitives reach a moment when perception is no longer enough. They begin to ask the hard questions. What does this vision mean? What is it asking of me? Is there a task hidden inside this insight? A calling when judgment begins to stir. When conscience meets vision, the aesthetic becomes ethical. The inner world is no longer just beautiful or fascinating. it becomes meaningful. The visionary becomes the servant of something greater. It's also the starting point of shadow work, a core concept in Jungian psychology where the unconscious begins to ask for integration through moral action. Not all reach that point. Some stay in the realm of perception forever, never asking, never acting. But those who do, those who turn vision into responsibility, are among the most powerful change agents humanity has ever known. There comes a moment when the vision demands more. Not just to be seen, not just to be admired, but to be lived. For some introverted intuitives, this demand feels absurd. The moral weight of the vision is too much, too strange, too unsettling. They turn away from it, brush it off, and silence the inner voice before it can speak too clearly. It's safer that way, less disruptive. After all, who wants to build a life around a whisper from the soul? But for those who are morally oriented, for those whose hearts are stirred, not only by beauty, but by truth, the vision becomes a calling. They do not just witness the image, they reflect on it. They wrestle with its meaning, and in doing so, they begin to sense something sacred, that the vision is not separate from them, not some detached picture floating through consciousness. It wants something. It wants to participate in their life. It wants to become flesh. And so, they take the first courageous step. They attempt to live their vision. But this path is not without danger. Because the introverted intuitive leans so heavily on perception, their efforts to live out their vision often become symbolic rather than practical. They craft a life that reflects eternal meaning, but not necessarily present-day relevance. Their truth becomes mythic, but invisible to the world around them. They speak, but few understand. They act, but few can follow. Their language grows poetic, but private. Their truth holy, yet untranslatable. And so they become what Jung called a voice crying in the wilderness. A bearer of truth with no audience. A prophet out of time. Yet there's a deeper complexity still, one hidden in the shadows of the unconscious. Because the intuitive's conscious life is so elevated, so attuned to symbols and subtle energies, their unconscious becomes heavy with forgotten things. What they repress most is the raw sensation of the outer world, the noise, the heat, the physical presence of life itself. And so, the psyche compensates, a kind of shadow twin. Engaging in shadow work helps the introverted intuitive acknowledge this primitive mirror rather than be hijacked by it. Integration begins when we stop running from what we fear inside ourselves. As Jungian psychology explains, the unconscious compensates for the one-sidedness of the dominant psychological function, often through primitive or irrational means. It clings to people, to objects, to smells and textures and moods. It may emerge through compulsions, obsessions, or physical ailments that the intuitive cannot understand, much less control. Their soul floats skyward, yes, but their shadow wild and wounded claws desperately at the ground beneath. When this imbalance becomes extreme, it can create neurosis, obsessive fears, hypochondria, a strange dependency on people who seem to hold symbolic power. The intuitive becomes trapped between two worlds, the visionary realm of images and the rough pull of forgotten instincts. And yet, perhaps the most painful aspect of this journey is how invisible it all is to the outer world. Introverted intuitives are often deeply misunderstood, not because they are arrogant or aloof, but because so much of what defines them happens beneath the surface. They speak little. They protect their inner world fiercely. Their silence may seem like coldness, their distance like disinterest. But in truth, they are simply guarding something fragile, something still becoming. To the outside world, they may appear reserved, secretive, even disconnected. Their words often come in fragments, strange flashes of insight, half-finished thoughts, metaphors no one asked for. They speak in symbols, not instructions, in images, not explanations, and the world, being impatient, too often looks away. But if we are wise, if we can learn to listen between the lines, we begin to understand what Jung understood, that these individuals are not meant to fit cleanly into the world. They are meant to reveal it, to help us see what lies beneath the surface of ordinary life, to remind us that the soul too has geography, that within each of us ancient rivers still run. So before we judge the silent one, the strange one, the one who sees what we cannot, perhaps we should ask, what is it costing them to carry that vision? And what might we gain if we dared to receive it? Still, compassion for the introverted intuitive must never become an excuse for silence. Yes, their inner lives are rich beyond measure. Yes, their visions are difficult to articulate. But to retreat entirely from the effort to communicate would be a tragedy not just for them, but for the world. That is why fate, it seems, often delivers them crushing external challenges not as punishment, but as purification. These trials serve a sacred purpose, to shake them out of the intoxication of their inner world, to force them to translate vision into expression, not for validation, but for connection. Often it takes a crisis, a deep personal need, a moment of existential urgency to finally pull forth their human voice. From the outside, especially through the lens of our extroverted rational culture, such people can appear useless, even fruitless. But Jung urges us to look deeper. For from a higher perspective, these individuals stand as living proof that life is not just something that happens outside of us. It blossoms within. They are the evidence that the soul is just as real as the sky. True, they are unbalanced, one-sided demonstrations of nature. But that in itself is a form of education. They challenge the modern myth that everything worthwhile must be visible, teachable, and explainable. Their very existence reminds us that wisdom is not always found in method, and that truth can whisper just as powerfully as it can shout. The kind of truth often uncovered through shadow work, subtle, symbolic, yet deeply transformative. In their own quiet way, these visionaries are teachers, not through lectures or doctrines, but through presence, through being. Their lives, even in their silence, instruct us in something our civilization has nearly forgotten, that the soul does not speak through slogans, nor is character built through clever methods. We live in a world obsessed with instruction. We place supreme value on systems, techniques, and information. If someone speaks well or has the right method, we call them a teacher, even if their character is hollow. But does a child learn more from what a parent says, or from how that parent lives? Jung reminds us that life educates far more than words. The way a teacher walks, the way they love, the quiet choices they make in solitude, that is where the true transmission occurs. And yet we continue to reward those who can parrot the correct method, even if they are spiritually bankrupt. This is the wound in modern education. We have mistaken speech for substance, and mastery of technique for depth of soul. And so the introverted intuitive, for all their impracticality, offers us a needed alternative, a mirror to the brokenness of our civilization. They are not saints. They lack the sharp edges of reason. Their ethics may be cloudy, their logic elusive, but their lives bear witness to something rare and precious, that meaning does not always arrive in clear sentences, and that fulfillment is not always found in achievement. Their visions, misunderstood, mystical, and often incommunicable, are reminders that not all paths lead outward. Some lead inward to the place where the soul is shaped. It's important to say that pure types like these Fully formed, fully introverted intuitives are rare. In real life, no one is a perfect expression of a single psychological type. We are all a mixture, a portrait, painted in layers with one dominant brushstroke and several quieter ones behind it. In nearly every case Jung examined, he found that even the most developed psychological function, intuition, thinking, sensation, or feeling, is always accompanied by a secondary function, usually one that is less refined, more unconscious, but still shaping the person's orientation. To be clear, any function, intuition, thought, feeling, or sensation can rise into consciousness. But Jung makes a critical distinction. A function is only truly conscious when not only its effects but its very principle governs how a person orients their entire consciousness. In other words, it's not just about using intuition or thought, it's about living by it, allowing it to define your way of perceiving, deciding, and acting. When thinking, for instance, is not just after-the-fact analysis, but becomes the decisive factor behind action, when logic is accepted as truth, without needing emotional backup or external proof, then we can say that the person is living under the rule of the thinking function. And likewise, when intuition isn't just a mood or impression, but the organizing center of the self, that's when the intuitive becomes something more than a dreamer. In the architecture of the human psyche, only one function can sit on the throne at a time. This is not just theory. It's something Jung observed in real life again and again. Whether it's thinking, intuition, sensation, or feeling, one of them always takes the lead, guiding how we interpret the world, make decisions, and define meaning. Why only one? Because if two functions of equal power were to compete for control, our internal orientation would become divided, confused, pulled in opposing directions. We cannot walk east and west at the same time. And our consciousness, in order to adapt clearly and effectively to life, needs a clear direction, a guiding principle that doesn't contradict itself. So while we all have access to multiple functions, only one rules. The others must serve, not contradict. This gives rise to what Jung called the auxiliary function. The auxiliary is like a faithful companion to the dominant function. It supports, balances, and enriches, but it never claims the crown. Importantly, it must be a function that doesn't oppose the primary one. Take thinking and feeling, for example. These are natural opposites. Both are judging functions, but they operate from entirely different logics. True thinking must exclude personal emotion to remain consistent and rational, just as authentic feeling must resist being reduced to cold logic. Trying to balance both as equals in a dominant role often results not in wholeness but immaturity, a muddy halfway point where neither function is fully developed. This kind of uniformity across all functions, Jung noted, is a hallmark of the primitive mind, a consciousness in which nothing has yet been fully differentiated or matured. But not all functions are incompatible. Thinking, for instance, can pair well with intuition or sensation because these are perceiving functions. They don't challenge thinking's judgment, but offer it valuable input. Intuition can show the thinker hidden possibilities. Sensation can ground abstract thought in concrete reality. But, and this is key, if the auxiliary grows too strong, it can change the whole character of the person. Suddenly, the thinker is no longer deciding but merely perceiving. Rationality gives way to instinct. The clarity of purpose is lost in a sea of impressions. That's why the auxiliary must remain in its rightful place, supportive, but not sovereign. It must serve the dominant function's purpose without trying to assert its own autonomy. In practice, this principle plays out in recognizable ways. A practical intellect is often paired with sensation, grounded, detail-focused, action-oriented. A speculative intellect may pair with intuition, imaginative, abstract, visionary. An artistic intuitive might balance with feeling, sensing the archetype, then shaping it through emotional resonance. A philosophical intuitive may unite with a strong thinking function, translating raw insight into a coherent worldview. These combinations are not rigid categories, but living patterns, archetypes of personality, recognizable across history, literature, and the people we know. Even the unconscious obeys this structure. It too forms patterns based on how the conscious mind is oriented. For instance, someone with a highly developed rational intellect might have an unconscious emotional life that is dominated by feeling and intuition, but suppressed, distorted, or chaotic due to neglect. This matters deeply in therapy and in life. Jung observed many cases where a physician or psychologist, perhaps unaware of this dynamic, would try to develop the repressed feeling function directly from the unconscious. But this rarely works as intended. The unconscious resists being rearranged by force. What emerges may not be wholeness, but confusion or instability, a clash of languages rather than a dialogue. The key is to understand the inner hierarchy, not to flatten it. True transformation doesn't come from trying to make all parts of the psyche equal at once. It comes from understanding which part leads, which part supports, and which part sleeps below, waiting perhaps for its season to rise. To know your dominant function is to begin to know your path the way you were designed to move through life. And to know your auxiliary is to know where your strength finds balance. Together, they form the inner axis of your identity. When the unconscious is forced too quickly into the light, it resists. And it resists not with logic, but with compulsion. Too often, well-meaning healers or psychologists attempt to activate the patient's most repressed function directly forcefully, without first strengthening their conscious foundation. But this shortcut comes at a high price. If successful, the patient may awaken, yes, but at the cost of losing their center. Instead of standing on their own inner truth, they begin to stand on the therapist. The doctor becomes the compass. The guide becomes the identity. This is what Jung called transference, a deep psychological entanglement, where the patient is no longer developing, but depending. And such a dependency can only be severed through painful rupture, sometimes even brutality. When a person's center of gravity shifts to someone else, losing that anchor feels like psychological death. But there is a better path, a gentler one, a wiser one. Rather than forcing open the door to the unconscious, Jung suggests we approach it indirectly by developing the auxiliary function first. For those whose dominant function is rational thinking or feeling, the way to the unconscious is not through more reason, but through the irrational intuition or sensation. These functions expand the conscious mind's capacity for mystery, uncertainty, and symbolic perception. They prepare it to meet the unconscious without being overwhelmed. In contrast, for those who are irrational types, those who live primarily through sensation or intuition, the path to balance is through the development of reason. Thinking and feeling bring structure to the inner world, offering clarity where once there was only instinct. This path is slower, but it is sacred, because it allows the psyche to unfold naturally without shattering itself. The unconscious is not a garden. It is a wilderness. Its forces are not refined or civilized. They are archaic, ancient, animalistic, closer to the mythic than the logical. And when these unconscious functions rise, they often appear in dreams as monsters, beasts, or cosmic battles, symbols of the struggle between inner opposites, between what we have become and what we have forgotten. These are not just images, they are revelations. They tell us, your soul is bigger than your ego can hold. Prepare yourself. This is the essence of shadow work, learning to face what we've buried, to embrace what frightens us, and to integrate the forgotten powers that live in the dark. And so the journey is not about conquest. It is about integration, not about destroying the unconscious, but about learning its language. This is the heart of shadow work, forging dialogue between our conscious self and the hidden forces that shape us. This is the very path Carl Jung laid out, where introverted intuition, shadow work, and psychological integration become a sacred journey of becoming whole. To meet the monsters not as enemies, but as messengers. To become not just more capable, but more whole. Let this be your invitation. If you are a thinker, dare to feel. If you are a dreamer, dare to structure. If you live in vision, come back to your body. And if you live in the senses, dare to ask, what does this mean? Your unconscious is not your enemy. It is the keeper of your forgotten fire. And when you are ready, it will come to meet you not with answers but with symbols. Not to replace your life, but to illuminate it. This is the work. This is the journey. And it begins within. If this message spoke to your soul, consider subscribing for more quiet reflections on Jungian psychology, shadow work, and the sacred path of inner growth.